حي على الفلاح.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم. فقد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن المؤمن إذا أذنب كان نكتة سوداء في قلبه، فإن تاب ونزع واستغفر سقل قلبه، فإن زادت فذلك الران الذي ذكر الله في كتابه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. كلا بل ران على قلوبهم ما كانوا يكسبون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. If we were to look at the seerah, of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if we were to look at the life of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, within the early stages of his life, within his childhood, we would find a very strange incident. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he narrates this incident himself, and he says that at a very young age, around the age of 4, at a very tender age, he would go out and he would feed the sheep with his two brothers, his two milk brothers by Radha'a. So they would leave early in the morning and they would come back late in the afternoon, late in the evening. So on one incident, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he went out with both his brothers. And one of his brothers came back and reported to their mother, Halima radiallahu ta'ala anha. He came back and he shouted, reporting to his mother that they have split open our Qurayshi brother. Now Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was from the tribe of the Quraysh. So they would refer to him as their Qurayshi brother. Halima radiallahu ta'ala anha, she became worried. Being the mother of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, looking over him, and at this age she was around the age of 3 to 4 years. Right? So imagine this, you are looking over a child within that age range, 3 to 4 years. His mother has entrusted him to you, and now your son, he comes saying to you that they have split open our Qurayshi brother. So imagine such a scenario for Halima radiallahu ta'ala anha. Right? She becomes worried. So she goes and fetches her husband. And now she tells her son to carry me to your Qurayshi brother. Bring me to your Qurayshi brother. Show me where you three have been feeding these sheep. So she goes, and upon finding them, she sees Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam perfectly fine. So she asks Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam what had happened. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he proceeds to inform her that he was visited by two people dressed in white, namely Angel Ibrahim alayhi salam and Angel Mikael alayhi salam. 2 out of 4 of the archangels. And they were accompanied by, some narrations mention 2 other angels, some narrations mention 3 other angels. So she proceeds to ask him what had happened during this visit. Because one of her sons mentioned to her that they have split open their Qurayshi brother. So So the narration goes on to mention that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Judge Ibrahim alayhi salam, they had split open the chest of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now this is the first incident that this has happened. Rather, this happened a total of 7 times in the life of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentions that they removed his heart. And they removed one speck of blood or one clot of blood from his heart. Then they washed his heart in water, ice water, that was in a silver tray. Silver tray, yes, that was in a silver tray. Some narrations mention that the tray was golden as well. This is due to the amount of times that it happened to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentions in a hadith that verily when a believer إِذَا أَذْنَبَ, whenever he errs, whenever he makes a mistake, كَانَتْ نُقْتَةً سَوْدَاءَ فِي قَلْبِهِ, that there is a black dot on his heart. And whenever he makes a mistake, this black dot, it grows. The size of it grows. So Angel Jibreel and Angel Mikael alayhi salam, they had removed this dot, they had removed this clot of blood from the heart of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Right? However, this remains with all the rest of us. This black dot on this clot of blood, it remains with the rest of us. No angel or no one can remove this from our hearts. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after stating that this piece of blood, this clot of blood or this black dot that we have upon our hearts, after stating that it continues to grow every time we commit a mistake or every time we commit a sin, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he then mentions how do we shrink it in size. So he tells us how it grows and how it accumulates size, right? Now he goes on to tell us how we can shrink its size and how we can remove it. He says, فَإِن تَابَ, so if we commit tawbah, وَنَزَعَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ, we commit tawbah and we regret, then it shrinks in size and it is removed. وَاسْتَغْفَرَ, and we make istighfar. سُقِلَ قَلْبُهُ, then your heart is washed and it becomes as though it is pure. It becomes as though this clot of blood or this black dot never began to grow in your heart. But now he mentions that فَإِن زَادَ زَادَتْ, however, if we continue committing wrong actions and we continue committing these errors, then this black dot, it continues to grow. Then he mentions that فَذَلِكَ الرَّانُ الَّذِي ذَكَرَهُ اللَّهُ فِي كِتَابِهِ, then he mentions that that is the Ran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he speaks about in his Quran. In Surah Al-Mutaffifin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إذا تتلى عليه آياتنا قال أساطير الأولين. Now there is a time in the life of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the Meccan period of his prophethood, wherein whenever Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would go out to give da'wah and he would mention the revelations revealed to him, he would recite Quran to the Quraysh and Ahlul Makkah, those people of Makkah. They would give him one reply, he would often hear, and they would say, قال أساطير الأولين, Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions this in Quran, and He says that the Quraysh and those of people of Ahlul Makkah, the people of Makkah, the residents of Makkah, they would often reply to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they would tell him that whatever you are speaking, those are just old fairy tales, old stories by our forefathers. Why? Because in the Meccan period of prophethood, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would receive verses that were meant to strengthen the iman of the Muslims, and verses that would invite towards Islam. So these verses mainly comprised of the seerah or the life stories of previous Anbiya alayhim as-salatu was-salam, previous incidents that occurred on the face of the earth. So the Makkans, the Quraysh, they would reply to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they would tell him that you are just telling stories. You are just repeating tales that occurred before. Now each one of these mentioned in the Quran, each one of the 25 prophets that are mentioned in the Quran, they are also a description for them, and they are also an incident that occurs with them. Hence the Ahlul Makkah, the Quraysh, they would say that you are telling stories, you are just making up stories and narrating it to us. Now for them this wasn't something far-fetched, because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, despite being someone who is classed as a ummi, which means despite being someone who was never taught to read or write, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he had the most eloquent of speech. So for them this wasn't something far-fetched, that he can make up stories. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He continues and He says, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives a reply to them. He says to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that no, Kalla is what is known as harful ra'd in Quran. Harful ra'd means a particle of disapproval, a particle of negation. This means Kalla, never. This speech that you have uttered and these Quran ayahs and these verses and these stories that we have revealed upon you, it will never be asatirul awwaleen. It will never simply be stories of your forefathers. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses the word Ran to describe that black dot or that clot of blood that is in our hearts. He says this Ran has become such to the extent that it covers their hearts, so much so that they are lost. Kalla bal rana ala qulubihim ma kanu yaksibun. This black dot, this clot of blood has covered their hearts so much to the extent that this revelation that I have given to you can no longer appeal to them. They are now considered as lost. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the hadith, he mentions that فَإِنْ زَادَ زَادَتْ. So if you continue doing wrong, if we continue committing these sins and we continue committing these errors, then our hearts would be such that it will be covered and engulfed by this clot of blood and this black spot. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses such a simulation to describe those disbelievers of Makkah, that their heart has been covered by this black dot to the extent that your words have no meaning to them. So such is the state of the heart of Ahlul Quraysh and Ahlul Makkah. Now this is something that we would not want to occur to ourselves. we would not want to continue committing such actions that our heart becomes similar to them. Our heart becomes covered by this black dot, by this clot of blood. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he gives us two ways out, two ways to strengthen this black spot in our heart. The first being tawbah, meaning رجوع عن معصية إلى الطاعة, leaving our bad actions, leaving our errors, and returning to the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allama Tibi alayhi rahmah, he mentions that tawbah is ترك الذنب لقبحه, leaving off such an action simply because of its displeasing nature. Then he mentions the second stage being الندم على ما فرط منه, to have regret that you have now encompassed the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to have regret for your actions. And the third and final stage being عزيمة على ترك المعاودة, that a person, he makes up his mind now and he is firm that he would not return to such an action. And the second way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions is istighfar. Some hadith mentions that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, during the day he would do istighfar 100 times in the morning and 100 times in the evening. Some hadith mentions that he would do istighfar 100 times during the day. Now Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he is ma'asum, meaning he is safeguarded from committing any sins. But why would Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam now continue to keep on doing 100 istighfar during the day? Now we are speaking about the day alone, not the night of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would look towards it as seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for any errors that may occur. He did not think about himself as being ma'asum. He did not think about himself as being, I am safeguarded from sins. Now it mentions that this splitting of the chest occurred 7 times to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So even if a person, he manages to attain that level of tawbah, he manages to attain that level of forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he should never feel safe. Because even with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this clot of blood and this black dot had to be removed 7 times during his lifespan of 63 years. So with these few words, inshaAllah, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he forgives us for all our errors and he grants us that ability to perform proper tawbah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.